This is your reminder that the BBC has yet to address the consistent transphobic leanings in its news coverage, and while the team behind Doctor Who is not connected to this in any way since this is a BBC-owned property, I'm going to keep pointing it out until the problem gets resolved. Links in a pinned comment below if you don't know what I'm talking about. I'll stop saying it when it stops being a problem. Do you have any idea how much stuff I have to do today? I didn't even have time to let my hair fully dry from the shower. Hey, let's talk about Doctor Who. You know, I seriously considered coming out with just this on myself, just to, really sell the bit of being fresh out of the shower. Oh, also, I was gonna use this Sonic in the opening, but the battery's practically dead, fittingly enough. Okay. They never want me to sleep. I swear. They have bugged my house, and they time this stuff to mess with me specifically and personally. This is not a conspiracy theory. I know it's true. I just can't prove it yet. But okay. Doctor Who. Is it canceled? No. The supposed upcoming holiday special we were supposed to get, that is. So let's start with the announcement from the BBC. And I'm going to show you the actual press release because, annoyingly, most outlets covering it are only pulling specific snippets. Here's the whole thing. Now, I'm not going to read the entire thing, but this is all of it. So what is relevant here? As part of securing the next phase of the show for future generations, and in line with the BBC's charter and agreement requirements, the BBC will put Doctor Who out to competitive tender this year. Now, if you don't know industry terms, competitive tender basically means it is being taken out of the hands of the production company that it had been with, which for the most recent series have been Bad Wolf Productions. Reminder, going back a little ways, BBC has not actually been making Doctor Who in-house. Bad Wolf Productions is not owned by the BBC. It's actually partially or maybe even fully owned now by Sony. I remember there was confusion for a little while that people thought Sony had bought Doctor Who. They didn't. They just bought the production company that had the contract to produce Doctor Who, but none of the rights. Anyways, Bad Wolf Productions will no longer be involved, and putting it out to competitive tender means that they are opening up for other production companies to come forward with their pitches, their proposals for a direction to take the show, possibly their proposals for head creatives to be involved in it, and basically let people bid. No, not necessarily with money, although money will be a factor because I'm sure part of their pitch will be, here's what we will want to spend per episode on it. But they're coming in with creative bids on what they would do, and the BBC will consider those and go with somebody. So that is what is happening right now. After careful consideration, the BBC, Russell T Davies, and Bad Wolf have collectively decided to not go ahead with the previously announced Doctor Who Christmas episode. This decision was not taken lightly, and we know it will be disappointing for fans. But in order to set the show up for future series, it was decided that rather than bridge the gap with a one-off special, we are choosing to push forward to invest in the long-term future of the show, which ensures that when the TARDIS lands once more, it will do so in all its glory. So, as part of this, they are severing any plans, and it does look like that means basically nothing. I'll get into what Russell T Davies himself said on Instagram in a little bit, but basically he confirmed that pretty much no work had ever been done on that thing. It was announced, maybe there were some ideas pitched, there wasn't a script yet, and it needed to have been in production by now. So you could make an argument that the decision to not do it was part of making it easier for whoever is coming in with their new pitch, that they don't necessarily have to be burdened by waiting for the Christmas special and figuring out how they're going to pick up from that or what have you. I think it's much more logistical. I think that because the BBC didn't know what was going to happen after that Christmas special, that production was just being massively delayed and held and held and held. And ultimately they decided, look, we should just not bother with this and just try and get more of a clean start with whoever ends up coming in next. So this sort of brings up something that I haven't talked about, because there was the rumor originating from the goddamn Sun like a couple weeks back, saying that that the special was being moved to Easter. And this is why I will never acknowledge the Sun as a source. And it really ticks me off that far more legitimate outlets were just reporting the Sun's work and not noting that it is a trash tabloid that makes crap up all the time. To be mildly fair to them, I suspect they probably got wind of the fact that it was not yet in production, which made it incredibly unlikely it was going to hit a holiday release, and then probably just made the stuff up about, oh, I bet you they'll move it to Easter, because I would be surprised if that was ever actually in serious consideration. So I think they probably just made that nonsense up, because yeah, they do that. They're the Sun. Sorry, that's not super relevant. It ticks me off that people will regurgitate stuff and not consider the freaking source. Okay. The previously announced Doctor Who animated series for CBeebies is currently in production. That I was a little surprised by, because I hadn't been paying attention to that. I actually thought it had already started coming out. That's probably just a sunk cost issue. They've spent so much on it. It's probably better just to finish it and release it than to just stop at whatever point they are in that. So we'll probably get however many series are currently in production, because it's not uncommon for animated series to actually produce 2 or even 3 series in the same production block, but release them over time. So however much is currently in production, that'll get released, and then that'll be it for that. The BBC retains all IP in Doctor Who. BBC Studios will continue to lead the global distribution of Doctor Who, as well as licensing consumer products, digital and immersive experiences on behalf of the BBC. In other words, they are not currently considering selling the IP to anybody. Again, this competitive tender is for production companies to come in and pitch their creative vision to enter into a partnership with BBC to be able to produce the show. It is not a bid to actually sell the damn thing. That's not saying that there might not be places that will try and do that anyway, but at least at present, BBC does not seem interested in selling it, which would be an incredibly foolish thing for them to do, if I'm being completely honest. So that just seems like even vaguely sound business decision. So let's get to Russell's statement over on Instagram. And so goodbye from me to Doctor Who, but hello to a big new future for the show, as the BBC announces it's putting the show out to tender. As a result, there won't be a Christmas special. We only cooked that up to guarantee a future when no one knew what would happen, but now we do know there's no need for it. So again, there's that admission that there was no plan for the Christmas special. It was just a thing that they threw together at the last minute, because at the time they made that announcement and threw in Billy Piper, they thought that would help ensure, like, it's like throwing a line and like, hopefully this hooks something and we can keep going. But then the decision happened later, like, actually, let's cut this line and we'll start cleaner with whatever it is that we pick up with later. So that's not surprising. I think a lot of us suspect, well, look, here's the thing. Let's be careful to not rewrite history and pretend that there was never a plan for any of what RTD2 was, any of this revival. Well, no, the revival era was before. Any of this era of him coming back. Let's not pretend that there was never a plan. I think there was very clearly a plan. I think there was very clearly an overall 3-season plan for Gatwa's Doctor. But things kept happening that derailed the plans, and then there was not the best decisions made in trying to deal with the fact that plans got derailed. It's very clear Millie Gibson was not supposed to leave after the end of the first series, given how underserved Belinda is as a character. It is incredibly clear that Gatwa was expected to stay on for at least one more series after this, and when he left, it's very clear that the last 20 minutes or so of the reality war were thrown together incredibly hastily, trying to tie the damn thing up, and that Billy Piper being thrown in at the last minute was just that, a last-minute thing of like, here, maybe we'll pick up on this. Like, it was held together with spit and a prayer. It always was, but that doesn't mean the entire era was. And also, let's not pretend that even in the scrambling, there were literally no good things. I still stand by that scene between Whitaker and Gatwa. That's a great scene. It made me actually annoyed that Whitaker didn't stay on for Davies' first series, because I think he wrote her really well for that scene. But anyway, that's, again, I'm tangenting. I'm sorry. This is going to be kind of a rough video, and there's probably going to be a heck of a lot more jump cuts in it than I normally have. I don't have the time to polish this up very much. I have too much stuff to do, and this is all just me. I don't get to shoot it and hand it off to an editor, and I'm making this about me, and I'm sorry. Okay, back to Russell. We'll have to wait a bit longer for new Doctor Who, but you'll be waiting for more Doctor Who than a one-off, so it's worth it. That's actually, like, honestly kind of a nice bit of optimism from him. You know, the perspective of, look, yes, you're losing this one-off special, but it is to help try and secure more of a firm future for down the line. So he's presenting it as a, we lose this one thing so that we can get much more later on. And whether or not that does or doesn't pan out, I don't know. It's nice to see an optimistic perspective, even from a guy whose decisions kind of contributed to getting us to where we are right now. For the record, there was no script, I never wrote it, and no actor was ever approached to play the next Doctor. Yeah, as I mentioned already, this is actually not especially surprising. Well, no, it's mildly surprising. I'm not surprised that there wasn't a script or a plan at the time they threw Billie Piper in there. I kind of thought he would have thrown together a script in the last 6 months, even if it wasn't production ready. So for him to say that there's still no script, that's mildly surprising. That may or may not actually reflect directly on him. That might just have to do with the fact that until he got a firm commitment from the BBC to actually guarantee, like, yes, we are producing this. Yes, we have everything, including the talent lined up for this, that it wasn't worth his time to be writing something that might never see production. You know, because that's asking someone to do free work. And if you're going to do the work, you should get paid. So, you know, it may or may not reflect badly on him that he never wrote a script even after creating the setup, but it kind of depends on the specifics, which we don't know. And, like, to be clear, I'm not trying to make excuses for Russell. I'm just trying to... It's so often when I see people screaming about the show and the people behind it or the actors in it or whatever else, it feels like they have such a lack of understanding of the back end and the production and how these things actually work that I don't know. I give a little bit more grace because I feel like I am willing to actually take into account the reality of these productions more than some of the people who talk about this or comment about it. Anyway, sorry, I'm making it about me again. I'm tired. I didn't want to be doing this right now. Okay, back to it. You may disagree. Fine, sit in that chair and wait to be proved right. You'll be waiting a long time. This is needless cattiness. I'm actually not even sure what he's saying. People may disagree. Like, is he saying people might disagree with him saying that there was no script and nobody was signed and people are going to call him a liar for that? I don't know what this is. This is needless cattiness. RTD is a little too online for his own good, and statements like that really feel like they spawn from that fact. Now I'm as excited as anyone to see what comes next. Will they keep the theme tune? Will they lose the blue box? Will they bring back the Draven? It's all up for grabs, which is so Doctor Who. Exciting and unpredictable and new. Here comes the future. Vorp, vorp. I'm not sure if I'd ever considered what the onomatopoeia for the TARDIS landing sound would be. Vorp. Yeah, I guess so. So let's be real careful about reading too much into him being like, will they keep the theme tune? Will it still be the blue box? That honestly kind of feels like a throwback to when he very first started working on the show back in 2005 with the revival, because, you know, he had talked about at the time, people asking him like, will you keep the blue police box or maybe make it a red telephone booth or something else? He's like, no, we're going to keep it original. But like at this point, realistically, I don't think that there would be much interest in ditching stuff like the theme or the blue box. I don't even think he's speculating that might happen. I think he's just kind of saying stuff. Be real careful about reading too much into it, because there are things that are iconic to Doctor Who to the point that I have a hard time buying that the BBC would accept a pitch that ditched them, if for no other reason than BBC's retaining the merchandising rights. Ditching the blue box kills so much of your merchandise. It's possibly the single most iconic symbol of the show. Like, that's That's absurd. Anyways, that was his comment on all this. And like I said, admission that he didn't have a plan and that really no work had been done. And while we don't know specifically the reason why Billie Piper was not listed as playing the Doctor and him saying like no one had been approached for the Doctor, I still hold by my initial assumption that that was probably a contract thing, that she had not technically signed on to play the part of the Doctor, so she was not credited as the Doctor. Would she have been? Maybe. Who knows? I feel real bad for her. She's going to be answering questions about what the heck was any of that for the rest of her life. And her answer is going to be, I don't know. I came in and did a favor because he asked me to. Bad Wolf Productions also put out an Instagram post basically confirming that they are no longer involved as well. Really not too much to read into this, so I'm not going to go through it. But yeah, they said something too. So what does this mean for the future of Doctor Who? We don't know. And we won't know for a while because there has to be time allowed for production companies to put together their pitches, potentially attach some creative people in that and approach the BBC with what they would want to do. And then one of those has to be approved. And then the actual pre-production process would start, casting and all this other stuff. So this is a much bigger deal than just finding a new showrunner. Because I know I've already seen people being like, Toby Whithouse said he'd want to do it. J. Michael Straczynski has said he'd want to do it. I'd be mildly interested in that one. I'm not going to lie. But, people have already been going like, ooh, these could be showrunners. It's not just about a new showrunner. It's an entire new production company. This is a much bigger deal. It's going to take longer than just finding a new showrunner. So how long will it take? We don't know. Definitely nothing comes out this year. I'd say pretty much guaranteed nothing comes out next year either. Next year, we might start getting announcements of who's involved. I suppose on the outside, to hedge my bet slightly, maybe we get a holiday special in 2027, but that'd be the most that I would expect, just for the amount of time needed to pull everything together once they've even selected which production company they're going to partner with, which who knows how long that process will take in the first place. So it's going to be a little while regardless. What will it look like when it comes back? That's really not worth speculating about at all because we have no way of knowing. Now, theoretically, lots of stuff is now up in the air, up for grabs. Somebody could, in theory, pitch a complete continuity reset, a complete reboot, and we just start from the beginning. And while I normally don't speculate a ton about these possibilities, I'm going to go over a few. Starting with that one, I think that's the worst option. I have said before, Doctor Who never needs a full continuity reboot, and I stand by that even now. I think that is the worst choice because not only does it throw out everything that's already been done, it gives the very lazy excuse as they work through it to, rather than come up with new stuff, just go, oh, and how will we do the Daleks? And how will we do the Cybermen? It's our turn to do Davros, and you're just doing the same stuff, mildly tweaked. And you know what? That's kind of why I hate reboots. Not because of, I inherently have a problem with wiping the slate clean, though sometimes I think that's a bad idea. But the fact that it just allows people to do less work creatively. You don't have to come up with something properly new. You just get to revisit the stories and tweak it a little bit. And arguably you can already do that by just revisiting these villains, these monsters, or whatever. So you don't even need a reboot if that's all you wanted to do in the first dang place. So is it possible somebody comes in with like a pitch for a full reboot? Yes, I'd be very surprised if the BBC took that. Again, if only just because it weakens the value of basically the entire back catalog, because you're saying, yes, we have all this history and stuff. It doesn't count anymore. You can completely disregard it, but it's here, and it sort of weakens the value of the back catalog of the IP to do that. Next option, logistically. I'm sure there are some people who are going to throw out ideas like, they could follow the 14th Doctor. We could ignore what happened with Gatwa and not have to deal with the Billie Piper regeneration thing, because we could start following the 14th Doctor and have him regenerate into somebody completely new. And it's like we've branched off, and now here's the series and line of Doctors that we're following. Theoretically, because we don't know exactly where in the timeline she falls, you could bring in Joe Martin as the fugitive doctor, and because we don't know how many versions of the Doctor were between her and whatever doctor she connects to that we already know, you could have her regenerate multiple times before you even need to connect it back to the main thing. While those are narrative possibilities, I don't think they're realistic logistically. Because again, something that I think is often disregarded when people start saying, ooh, they could do this, I think they should do this, they disregard whether or not the people involved would actually want to. Because while David Tennant and Joe Martin have expressed a lot of love for Doctor Who, and, Joe Martin has been willing to, do Big Finish and come back for some one-off appearances. And David Tennant obviously was willing to do the 60th anniversary specials. I don't think either one of them wants to be the Doctor, the mainline ongoing show Doctor as their full-time gig, because that basically becomes your entire life. You're not just an actor playing the role, which is what you get to do when you do it in small bursts, the way Tennant did for the 60th or the way Joe Martin has been. You have to become the brand ambassador for the entirety of Doctor Who, and promoting it becomes the thing that you do basically the entire time that you're not filming it. This is why the actors have a tendency to burn out after 3 years. Not because the shooting of Doctor Who itself is so draining, but when you're not shooting it, you're being asked about it, you're making appearances about it, you're promoting it. You have to be the face of the franchise actively for as long as you're in the part. And I don't think either Tennant or Martin wants that gig. So while there is narrative potential in doing either of those, I don't think that's going to happen. For a similar reason, I don't think doing like a limited series with Paul McGann is necessarily on the table. Even if he did want to do it, he's completely closed off and bottled in a way that theoretically spinning off from the Fugitive Doctor or the 14th Doctor wouldn't be, because we know who he regenerated from and we know who he regenerates into, meaning that you can't just have him regenerate into somebody completely new in the interim, because we know where his story ends. So you just get a very limited amount of stuff with him. Besides which, what is there even to do with him that Big Finish hasn't already done or isn't currently doing? But the show won't take Big Finish into account. They never have, they never will. That's not me saying it's non-canon. I'm just saying what I've always said. The show is the primary canon. They get to do whatever they want. Big Finish is canon until the show contradicts it, and the show is free to do that at any point. Now, in terms of creatives and who might come in, I mentioned like Toby Woodhouse, JMS. I don't necessarily want to speculate on specific people who may or may not be good for the showrunner position, especially because that's not even the point that we're at. We're not at the point of considering who the showrunner is. I mean, unless a production company, as part of their pitch, has already gotten a hold of who they would want to showrun it. But again, we're not going to be privy to all that until the decision's already made. Here's what I will say about whoever takes over next. I can tell you what type of creative I would like to see. I would like to see an equivalent to Nicholas Meyer or to Tony Gilroy. For context, Nicholas Meyer was the director of Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. Tony Gilroy did Andor for Star Wars. And in both cases, neither were massive fans of the franchise up to that point. Tony Gilroy seemed to be a fan to some degree, but most would probably consider him a casual fan of Star Wars. Nicholas Meyer knew almost nothing about Star Trek, but was willing to learn about it in order to do it well. So I think that is what is kind of needed. Somebody who isn't buried and mired in, being an obsessive fan of everything that had come before. I think that approach served the initial revival in 2005 very well. I think at this point, unburdening from being a lifelong fan is probably a better idea at this point, if only to see what new feelings and flavors it brings to the thing that wouldn't happen with somebody who is an obsessive fan, the way that RTD is, the way that Stephen Moffat is, and the way that Chris Chibnall is. So I think that is the energy that would really benefit the show to find in a showrunner. Somebody who is either not particularly acquainted, but is willing to learn more about it in order to honor it properly, the way Nicholas Myers did, or somebody who is kind of a casual fan, but isn't deep into all of the background and lore and mythology the way that Tony Gilroy appears to have been. What we don't need is we don't need a Dave Filoni, who is the guy currently running Star Wars. And look, if you like Dave Filoni's stuff in Star Wars, that's great. I don't, and the main reason is it feels like homework. It is so referential to so much stuff, including a ton of stuff that I haven't seen. Now, if you are invested in all the stuff that he's referencing and pulling from and, integrating into things, I'm sure it's great for you. I'm not. And I don't think that approach would be good for Doctor Who. And I'm not even necessarily saying that approach is bad for Star Wars where it is right now. I don't know. I'm not watching most of the stuff that he's doing, but it might be working for Star Wars. I don't think it would work for Doctor Who. Are we headed for a new wilderness years? That's the period between when the show was officially put on hiatus in 1989 and when it came back in 2005. Probably not. I suppose it is technically possible that either BBC does not get very many bids or doesn't like any of the bids that it gets for what to do with the show, and the process of trying to find somebody to do it just becomes so elongated that it lasts for years, or BBC just benches the show altogether and says, we'll figure this out another time. We're not even going to take more pitches right now. Hey, adding in a little additional bit here because there's something that I didn't talk about that I think actually is a factor, especially if we're talking about whether or not there's going to be a new wilderness years period, which is the production company, bids, the competitive tender is only for the production company. Distribution is a completely different thing. So in terms of thinking of this last era, we're not talking about who replaces Disney as the distributor. We're only talking right now about who replaces Bad Wolf as the production. And those are almost always completely separate entities. It is possible for the same company to do distribution and production. I would be shocked if anyone who could afford to do that would, because almost certainly anyone who would want to do that, Amazon, Apple TV, etc., would want to be buying the underlying IP rights, which again, BBC does not seem interested in selling, and I don't think they should. It'd be very foolish of them to do that. So we are not currently dealing with the question of who do they partner for distribution, because as I said, Disney deal fell apart and we don't know where new episodes will air in the US, in Australia, in Europe, basically anywhere outside of the UK. That's a question that can't even really be broached until there is a production lined up, because you're probably not going to find a entity willing to distribute the thing unless you already have a plan in place and potential creatives and everything else. This happens in movies and TV all the time. A production company will put all this stuff together, put together a pitch deck, and then look for the people who will help distribute it. And those people, the distributors, are the ones kicking in financials. The production company isn't paying for this. As I said, they'll propose budgets for how much they think episodes should cost under whatever their plan is, but they're not the ones paying for it. The ones paying for it are either the BBC, a new distribution partner, or a combination of the two. Finding a new distribution partner is a completely separate issue and potentially a very fraught one, because the Disney deal going south as quickly and as badly as it did probably makes Doctor Who not particularly appealing to most of the entities that could afford to distribute it outside the UK. Might that result in a wilderness years? It might. It is possible that a production company will be lined up, they'll have a plan, they'll have a showrunner, they might even have a proposed actor for the part, and then they just can't find a distributor who's willing to sink the money in to actually ensure that the thing gets made and put out. Now, here's one possibility. I'm not sure how likely it is, but it is at least possible. It would require a massive slash to the budget for it to be affordable. But it is technically possible that the BBC will just move forward without a distribution partner because they don't need one for the UK. They release it themselves in the UK. They need a distribution partner to release it literally anywhere else. So one possible route, and again, I think the issue here is I don't know if BBC can afford to do this even on a slash budget, but one thing that they could try and do is start making it, have a new series out, and then hope that it is received well enough that since there is now a proven, hey, here's a solid series, people are liking it, that then distributors will come knocking and go, oh, hey, we see you're doing a good thing. We want in on this. Because the problem right now is they have to ask distributors to agree to a plan that may or may not work, which is what happened with Disney. They agreed to a plan and the plan didn't pay off. So that is one possible route. And again, it is possible that we look at a wilderness years. If we do, I think the thing that will result in that is trouble finding a distribution partner, not a production studio. So, yeah, that was what I needed to add in. But as of right now, the situation is Christmas is canceled. It's just kind of a fun phrase to say. I don't know why. But yeah, Christmas is canceled, and it's going to be a little while before we know what's happening. Any speculation that people have at this point is just that. Even the stuff that I said is mostly speculation, which I don't indulge in a lot, but, just throwing some possibilities out there. Here's one other thing that I'll add on. Normally, I try and shut down the potential for conspiratorial thinking, i.e. along the lines of, is somebody lying? Like, with the BBC coming forward and saying, this is what we're doing, do we believe them? Normally, I just say, yes, believe them. Why wouldn't you? Well, because they kind of lied about the Christmas special. I mean, I don't think it was a total lie in that I don't think that at the time it was announced, they thought it would never happen. I think the plan was to try and make that a reality, but they announced it as if it was definitely going to happen when it wasn't locked. So if you want to take any part of these announcements with a massive grain of salt and be skeptical about whether or not you want to believe any of the people involved, look, the reality is straight up, Russell is out, Bad Wolf is out, BBC's looking for somebody else. I don't think any of that is arguable. If you feel that the BBC is nowhere near committed to Doctor Who as they present themselves as being, that maybe they're just doing the competitive tender with the intention of then later going, we didn't like any of these, we're putting it to bed for a while. I'm not going to shout you down for having those thoughts, because again, they kind of already proved themselves to maybe not be the most trustworthy given what has now happened with the holiday special. But at the same time, just be careful about how far you run with that. The instant you start to head down the path of conspiratorial thinking that leads to, and this is why they lied, and they're doing this on purpose, and they're sabotage, stop. BBC wants the show to be successful. They don't know how to do that right now. That's why they're taking bids and pitches. RTD wanted the show to be successful. It wasn't under his return, but he wanted it to be. There's no validity to the idea that anybody was making it bad on purpose or sabotaging it. Everybody thought that the outcomes of the choices and decisions that they made were going to be something else and were going to be better than this. This is the reality that we're stuck with. This is not what anybody wanted. Not the fans, not the makers, not the BBC. But it's what we've got. So, at the very least, I really hope I'm right that we're probably not going to get a major announcement until next year, or at least close to the end of this year, because I have stuff to do. But anyways, that's the state of Doctor Who. Up in the air. Which, honestly, the funny thing is, it's not that much different to where we were before announcing the lack of a Christmas special. All that's been removed is this one thing that we thought we were going to get. Now we're not going to. But the future of the show after that was just as much up in the air as it is now. Actually, arguably, it was more up in the air than it is now, because we have a clear look at what is going on and what the next step is, which is we are open to proposals about what to do with the show. Tell us what you want, and we'll see if we can find someone we can work with. That's a much clearer path forward, even though we don't know what endpoint that results in. But it is a path forward. That is a lot better than, there's a Christmas special, and after that, we'll figure it out. So, you know what? As much as the timing of this announcement annoys me, I'd actually argue this is probably a better thing in terms of stability, or at least potential stability. The show's not stable right now, but potential stability for the show than the situation that we were in up to now. And I'm sure everybody who is much more critical of RTD than I feel like being, and again, I'm not here to make excuses or praise the guy, but he didn't make decisions trying to harm the show. He made decisions that he think would help it and would work. A lot of them didn't. It's a thing that happens. Anyways, thank you very much for your time. I have to now rush edit this and then start doing the actual work that I was planning to do today. So I got stuff to do. But whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills, enables me to do this as my living, even if you can't help me out that way. Like, share, subscribe. They all help. Don't worry too much about it, though. Because even if you're as exhausted as I am by this, you are beautiful, you are valid, and you are loved. You are the council. I am just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned. Now to thank my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Jared Boyce, Zubin Lipfula, Auntie Kate 808, Mira G, Angry Casperl, Claire Wright, Dave Hall, Snark Shark, Oliver B, Mystic Shadow, Daphne Matthews, Sean Miller, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Melissa Pedersen, Becky Sparks, Twilord, Kay Johnston, Tracy Scrabbit, Pau Barabajoggle, Magdalena, Sir Didymus is my favorite, and a couple of additional names I'll have to dub in because I forgot to add them. And here I am with those dubbed names. Thank you to the Demon Bunny, Vin Jost, and Sarvis. I'm a little bit distracted, you might have noticed. Everyone's reintegrated. Don't worry about Navarro. He got rehoused. He's completely happy where he is. But this is the mischief now. And it's a lot.